The wagon rattled into Copper Ridge on a Tuesday that felt like the end of something. Elias Varn heard it before he saw it, the grinding complaint of wooden wheels against frozen mud, the tired snort of horses who'd been driven too long without rest. He was standing outside the general store with a sack of grain over one shoulder, watching the street with the same flat expression he wore for everything these days. 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years since he'd felt much of anything except the dull ache of routine. The wagon driver was a squat man named Hoskins, who ran the mail route between settlements. He pulled up outside the saloon and didn't bother climbing down, just sat there like he was waiting for someone to notice the problem. "Package," Hoskins called out to no one in particular. A few heads turned. Elias shifted the grain sack, ready to move on, but something made him pause. Hoskins wasn't looking at the saloon. He was looking at the back of his wagon. There was a woman sitting there. At least, Elias assumed it was a woman. Hard to tell with the burlap sack tied over her head. The street went quiet in that particular way frontier towns do when something unusual happens. Not silent, but hushed, like everyone's holding the same breath. Doors opened. People stepped out onto boardwalks. Someone laughed, nervous and sharp. "What the hell is that?" someone muttered. Hoskins spat over the side of the wagon. "Mail order bride for Elias Varn." Elias felt the words hit him like cold water. He hadn't ordered anyone, hadn't even thought about it. Not really. Well, maybe once, late at night, when the cabin walls pressed in too close and the silence screamed louder than any living thing. He'd written a letter. Drunk, probably. Sent it off to one of those agencies back east that promised companionship for men willing to pay. He'd forgotten about it. The woman sat perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap, and even through the rough weave of her dress, Elias could see she was thin. Too thin. The sack over her head didn't move. She didn't flinch at the laughter starting to ripple through the crowd. "Take the sack off," someone yelled. "Let's see what he paid for." Hoskins shook his head. "Can't. Came with instructions. She stays covered till the buyer accepts delivery." He pulled a crumpled envelope from his coat and waved it in Elias's direction. "You Varn?" Elias didn't answer right away. He was looking at the woman's hands. They were clenched now, tight enough that he could see the white of her knuckles even from 15 feet away. "I'm Varn," he said finally. Hoskins tossed the envelope. It landed in the mud near Elias's boots. "Then she's yours. Note says no returns. Good luck." Elias bent and picked up the envelope. The paper was cheap, the handwriting worse. Inside was a single line scrawled in thick pencil. Unfit for standard placement. No refunds. No exchanges. He read it twice. The words didn't change. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered behind him. It was Walt Kerrigan, who owned the saloon and considered himself Copper Ridge's unofficial mayor. "You actually gonna take her, Varn?" Elias looked up. The woman still hadn't moved. The sack over her head was plain burlap, the kind you'd use for potatoes. There was a rough cord tied around her neck to keep it in place, not tight enough to choke, but close. He could see the edge of dark hair escaping near her shoulder. "What's wrong with her?" Walt pressed. "She's sick? Criminal?" "Probably ugly as sin," another voice offered, and a few people laughed. Elias folded the note and shoved it in his pocket. He walked toward the wagon, and the crowd shifted to give him space, everyone suddenly very interested in seeing what happened next. Hoskins watched him with the blank expression of a man who'd seen stranger things and didn't care to remember them. When Elias reached the wagon, he stopped. The woman's head tilted slightly, just enough that he knew she was aware of him standing there. "Can you hear me?" he asked. A pause, then a small nod. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "You want that sack off?" This time the nod came faster. Elias reached up. His hands were rough from years of work. Cutting timber, breaking horses, surviving winters that killed softer men. He untied the cord carefully, like he was diffusing something that might explode, and pulled the sack away. The crowd went silent. The woman beneath wasn't ugly. She wasn't disfigured. She didn't have scars or marks or any of the things people had been whispering about. She had a pale, angular face with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that looked too large for her head. Her hair was black and tangled, falling past her shoulders in a mess that suggested weeks, maybe months, without proper care. She looked exhausted, hollowed out, but she wasn't broken in the way they'd expected. She looked at Elias, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, though they'd never met. The recognition of two people who'd both spent too long on the wrong side of something they couldn't name. "What's your name?" Elias asked. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again, and this time he heard it, barely louder than a breath. "Elara. Elara E," he repeated. "You got a last name?" "Quinn." Walt Kerrigan pushed closer, his face red. "Varn, you out of your mind? You don't know what's wrong with her. Could be diseased, could be insane." Elias didn't look at him. "She talked to you, Walt." "What? Did she say anything to you? Threaten you? Spit at you?" "Well, no, but then I don't see how it's your business." He reached up and offered Elara his hand. She stared at it for a long moment, like she'd forgotten what the gesture meant. Then, slowly, she took it. Her fingers were ice cold. Elias helped her down from the wagon. She stumbled on the last step, and he caught her by the elbow, steadying her. Up close, he could see the bruises on her wrists, faint and yellowing but unmistakable. Someone had tied her up. Recently. "You got belongings?" he asked. Elara shook her head. "Nothing, just this." She gestured at the dress she was wearing, which was little more than rags held together by stubbornness. Hoskins cleared his throat. "That'll be $40 for transport and handling." Elias shot him a look that could have stripped paint. "You brought her here in a sack and you want $40? Company policy. Company can go to hell." Hoskins shrugged. "Take it up with them. I'm just the driver." Elias pulled a few crumpled bills from his pocket and shoved them at Hoskins, who counted them quickly and nodded. The wagon lurched forward, and within seconds, it was rattling back down the road, leaving Elias standing in the mud with a woman he didn't know and a town full of people staring at them both like they were a sideshow act. "Well," Walt said, crossing his arms, "hope you know what you're doing, Varn." Elias didn't answer. He turned to Elara. "You able to walk?" She nodded. "Then let's go." The walk to Elias's cabin took 20 minutes, and neither of them spoke. Elara kept her head down, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Elias walked a few steps ahead, his mind churning through possibilities he didn't want to examine too closely. He'd acted on instinct back in town, something he didn't do often, and now he was stuck with the consequences. The cabin sat at the edge of the tree line, a squat structure of rough-hewn logs and a roof that leaked in two places. It wasn't much. Sarah used to say it had character, but Sarah had been kind about things like that. Now it was just a place to sleep and eat and wait for the next day. Elias pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dim, the only light coming from the gaps around the shutters. He moved to the fireplace and started building a fire, his hands working automatically while his mind struggled to catch up. Elara stood just inside the doorway, looking around like she was cataloging exits. "Sit," Elias said, nodding toward the table. She didn't move. "You're safe here," he added, softer this time. "I'm not going to hurt you." Elara's eyes flicked to him, searching for something. Truth, maybe, or proof that his words meant anything. Whatever she found, it must have been enough, because she crossed the room slowly and lowered herself into one of the chairs. Elias finished with the fire and straightened, brushing soot from his hands. He looked at her properly for the first time since they'd left town. She was shivering, her lips tinged blue. "You cold?" She nodded. He grabbed a blanket from the bed, Sarah's blanket, the one he hadn't been able to throw out, and draped it over her shoulders. Elara pulled it tight around herself, and for a moment she looked like a child hiding from the dark. "You want something to eat?" Elias asked. "I don't want to be trouble." "You're already trouble. Might as well eat." That got the ghost of a smile, so faint he almost missed it. He turned to the stove and started heating leftover stew from the night before. It wasn't much, venison, potatoes, some wild onions, but it was hot, and it would fill her up. While the stew warmed, Elias sat down across from her. The silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and heavy. "You gonna tell me what happened?" he asked finally. Elara's hands tightened on the blanket. "What do you want to know? Why you were in that sack? Why someone thought you were unfit?" She looked away toward the fire. "I was married." Past tense? "He's still alive, if that's what you're asking. But I'm not married anymore. Not in any way that matters. Elias waited. People talked when they were ready, and pushing never helped. Alara took a slow breath. His name was Richard Calloway. He is a banker, important man, respected. Her voice was flat, like she was reciting facts from a ledger. We were married 6 years. He never hit me, never raised his voice. Everyone thought I was the luckiest woman alive. But you weren't. No. The word came out sharp. He didn't need to hit me. He had other ways. Elias didn't say anything. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched when she spoke. He controlled everything, Alara continued. What I wore, who I spoke to, where I went. He'd tell me things that weren't true, that I'd said something I hadn't, that I'd forgotten conversations we never had. He'd move my belongings and then act concerned when I couldn't find them, like I was losing my mind. She paused, her voice dropping. After a while, I started to believe him. I thought maybe I was broken. Maybe I was the problem. You weren't. Alara looked at him, surprised. You don't know that. I know enough. She studied his face for a long moment, then looked back at the fire. 6 months ago, I found out he'd been stealing from me. My father died when I was young, left me a small inheritance. Richard convinced me to let him manage it, told me it was safer that way. Her laugh was bitter. He'd been moving the money into his own accounts, piece by piece. If I hadn't seen the papers by accident, I never would have known. What did you do? I left. Middle of the night, took what I could carry and ran. She pulled the blanket tighter. He sent men after me, found me in a boarding house 3 towns over. They dragged me back. He told everyone I'd had a breakdown, that I wasn't well, and people believed him. Why wouldn't they? He's Richard Calloway. I'm just his wife. Elias felt something dark and familiar settle in his chest. Anger, cold, and controlled. How'd you end up here? He decided I was an embarrassment. Contacted one of those bride agencies, paid them to take me off his hands. Told them I was unstable, unfit for polite society. Her voice cracked, just slightly. They put me in that sack so no one would have to look at me, so I wouldn't scare off the other men. The stew started to bubble, and Elias stood to take it off the heat. He ladled it into 2 bowls and set one in front of Alara. She stared at it like she didn't know what to do. Eat, Elias said. She picked up the spoon slowly, her hands shaking. The first bite seemed to unlock something, and she ate quickly after that, like she hadn't had a real meal in weeks. Probably she hadn't. Elias ate his own portion in silence, watching her. When she finished, she set the bowl down and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. You're stuck here now. Town like this, people talk. They're already talking. I know. And I'm not... He stopped, trying to find the right words. I'm not looking for a wife. I don't know what I was thinking when I sent that letter, probably wasn't thinking at all. Alara met his eyes. What are you looking for? Honestly, I don't know. She nodded slowly, like that was an acceptable answer. What do you want me to do? Stay, for now. Until we figure something out. He gestured around the cabin. It's not much, but it's warm and it's safe. You can have the bed. I'll take the floor. I can't. You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. Alara looked at him for a long moment, something uncertain flickering across her face. Then she nodded. All right. The first week passed in a strange, fragile rhythm. Elias woke before dawn each day and went about his work, chopping wood, checking traps, repairing the sections of fence that winter had damaged. Alara stayed in the cabin, moving quietly through the small space like she was afraid of taking up too much room. She cleaned without being asked, mended his shirts, cooked meals that were better than anything he'd made in 3 years. They didn't talk much. Elias wasn't good at talking, and Alara seemed to prefer silence. But sometimes, in the evenings, they'd sit by the fire and he'd catch her watching him. Not with suspicion, exactly. More like she was trying to figure out if he was real. On the 8th day, she spoke first. Why'd you take me? Elias looked up from the knife he was sharpening. What? In town. You could have walked away. Everyone expected you to. He set the knife down, considering. I don't know. Maybe because everyone expected me to. That's not a reason. Maybe I didn't like the way they were looking at you. Like I was broken? Like you were a thing. He picked up the knife again, testing the edge with his thumb. People look at you like that long enough. You start to believe it. Alara was quiet for a moment. You sound like you know something about that. Maybe I do. She didn't push, and he was grateful for it. He wasn't ready to talk about Sarah, about the way the town had looked at him after she died, with pity and discomfort, like grief was something contagious. Instead, he stood and reached for his coat. I'm going to check the traps. You'll be all right here? Alara nodded. He was halfway to the door when she spoke again. Elias? He turned. Thank you for not looking at me like I'm broken. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stepped out into the cold. The trouble started on a Sunday. Elias had gone into town for supplies, leaving Alara at the cabin. It was the first time he'd left her alone, and he'd hesitated at the door, some instinct telling him to stay. But she'd waved him off, insisting she'd be fine, and he'd forced himself to trust it. The town was busier than usual, people milling around after church services. Elias kept his head down and moved quickly, loading his wagon with flour, salt, a few other necessities. He was almost done when Walt Kerrigan cornered him outside the general store. Varn, got a minute? Elias kept loading. Not really. It's about the woman. That made him stop. He turned slowly, his expression flat. What about her? Walt glanced around, lowering his voice. People are worried. No one knows anything about her. Where she came from, what she's running from. She's not running from anything. You sure about that? Because I heard some things. Heard she might have been involved in something bad back east. Theft, maybe, or worse. Elias felt his jaw tighten. You heard wrong. Maybe. But you can't blame folks for being cautious. Strange woman shows up in a sack labeled unfit. People are going to ask questions. Let them ask me. I'm trying to help you, Varn. If she's trouble, she's not. Walt's expression hardened. You don't know that. Hell, you don't know her at all. She could be dangerous. Elias stepped closer, and Walt took an involuntary step back. You got something to say, Walt. Say it plain. Fine. The town council thinks maybe she should move on. For everyone's safety. The town council, Elias repeated slowly, can go straight to hell. He turned and climbed onto the wagon, snapping the reins before Walt could respond. The ride back to the cabin felt longer than it should have, his mind churning with anger and something else. Worry, maybe, though he didn't want to name it. When he reached the cabin, Alara was outside, standing near the tree line with her arms wrapped around herself. She looked pale. Elias jumped down from the wagon. What's wrong? I heard something in the woods. What kind of something? Growling, and I saw... She pointed toward the trees. Tracks. Big ones. Elias moved past her, crouching to examine the snow. She was right. The prints were fresh, deep gouges that could only belong to one thing. Mountain lion, he said quietly. Alara's breath caught. Is that bad? Depends. If it's just passing through, we're fine. If it's hunting... He stood, scanning the tree line. Get inside, lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. What are you going to do? Make sure it's gone. He grabbed his rifle from the cabin and started toward the woods, moving carefully. The tracks led deeper into the trees, weaving between the pines in a pattern that suggested the animal was circling, looking for weaknesses. Elias followed them for nearly an hour, his senses on high alert. He'd dealt with mountain lions before. Usually they avoided people, but a starving one could be desperate enough to attack. This one had gotten too close to the cabin for comfort. He was about to turn back when he heard it, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Elias froze, raising the rifle slowly. The forest had gone silent, the kind of silence that meant something big and dangerous was nearby. Then he saw it. The mountain lion was crouched on a low branch about 30 feet ahead, its yellow eyes locked on him. It was huge, easily 150 pounds, its muscles coiled tight beneath tawny fur. Starving, by the look of it, ribs showing, fur matted and dull. Elias kept the rifle steady, his finger on the trigger. He could take the shot. Probably. But the angle was bad, and if he missed, The lion's ears flattened. It was going to jump. Elias made a decision he didn't fully understand. Instead of firing, he stepped forward, planting himself between the lion and the direction of the cabin. He spread his arms, making himself as large as possible, and shouted, a raw, guttural sound that echoed through the trees. The lion hesitated. Elias shouted again, louder this time, and took another step forward. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. The lion stared at him, its tail twitching. Then slowly, it turned and leapt from the branch, disappearing into the deeper woods. Elias stood there for a full minute, his heart pounding, before he lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking. He'd gambled, and it had worked, but it could have just as easily ended with him dead. When he got back to the cabin, Alara was standing in the doorway, her face white. I heard you shouting. I thought, it's gone, Elias said, cutting her off. He leaned the rifle against the wall and sat down heavily on the steps, suddenly exhausted. Alara sat beside him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. You didn't shoot it. Didn't have a clean shot. So you scared it off. Something like that. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you put yourself between me and it, even when you didn't have to. Elias looked at her. Her dark eyes were wide, searching his face for something he didn't know how to give. Yeah, he said simply. I did. Alara's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded breaking through the careful walls she'd built. No one's ever... She stopped, her voice catching. Why would you do that? Elias didn't have a good answer, so he told her the truth. Because you're here, and as long as you're here, I'm not going to let anything hurt you. The words hung between them, simple and solid. Alara's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it, Elias said. Just know it's true. They sat there on the steps as the sun dipped below the mountains, two people who'd been broken in different ways, learning, slowly, carefully, what it might mean to be whole. Winter deepened, and with it came a rhythm neither of them had expected to find. Alara learned the shape of Elias's silences, which ones meant he was working through something in his head, which ones were just the comfortable quiet of a man who'd spent too many years alone. She learned that he took his coffee black and bitter, that he couldn't stand waste of any kind, that sometimes he'd stop mid-task and stare at nothing for minutes at a time, lost in memories he never spoke about. Elias learned that Alara flinched at sudden movements, that she apologized too much for things that didn't need apologizing for, that she had nightmares that left her gasping in the dark. He learned not to ask about them. She'd talk when she was ready. 3 weeks after the mountain lion incident, Alara started sleeping through the night. Small victory, but Elias noticed. The town noticed other things. Every time Elias went in for supplies, he felt the weight of their stares. Walt Kerrigan had been busy, spreading rumors dressed up as concern. The woman was trouble. Had to be. No normal woman ended up in a sack. Elias ignored it, mostly. He'd never cared much what people thought, and he wasn't about to start now. But Alara felt it. He could see it in the way she tensed whenever hoofbeats approached the cabin, in the way she kept herself close to the walls when she moved through town on the rare occasions he brought her along. It was a Saturday morning when everything shifted. Elias was outside splitting wood, the axe coming down in steady, measured strikes. Alara had been inside baking bread, something she'd started doing without him asking, filling the cabin with smells that made it feel less like a place to survive and more like a home. She came out carrying 2 cups of coffee, picked her way across the frozen ground, and handed him one. Thanks, he said, setting the axe down. They stood there drinking in silence, watching their breath fog in the cold air. The mountains were sharp against the sky, white peaks catching the morning light. I need to tell you something, Alara said finally. Elias looked at her. Her face was set, determined in a way he hadn't seen before. All right. I lied. When I said Richard stole from me. She took a breath. He did. But there's more. I'm listening. The money he took, it wasn't just my inheritance. It was substantial, nearly $30,000. She watched his face for a reaction. My father was more than comfortable. He made investments, good ones. Richard convinced me the money would be safer in his accounts, that he'd manage it properly. I believed him because, her voice cracked slightly, because I wanted to believe someone could take care of me. He didn't steal it all? No. I got to the accounts before he could transfer everything, took what I could, and ran. She set her cup down on the chopping block, her hands shaking. There's a bank draft, hidden in the lining of my dress, the one I was wearing when I arrived. $22,000. Elias whistled low. That's a fortune. It's my father's legacy, the only thing I have left of him. Her eyes met his. And Richard wants it back. Not because he needs it, he has his own money, but because I took it. Because I left. Because I proved he couldn't control me. He'll come looking. Yes. You should have told me sooner. I know. Elar's voice went quiet. I was afraid. Afraid you'd send me away if you knew what kind of trouble I brought with me. Elias picked up the axe again, testing its weight. I'm not sending you anywhere. Elias, you heard me. He looked at her straight on. Whatever's coming, we'll deal with it. Together. Elar's expression shifted, something between relief and disbelief. You don't have to do this. I know I don't. He brought the axe down, splitting a log clean through. But I'm going to anyway. She didn't say anything else, but when she picked up her coffee and went back inside, there was something different in the way she moved. Less like she was trying to disappear, more like she had a right to exist. That afternoon, Elias rode into town alone. He needed to think, needed space to process what Elara had told him. $22,000. Men had killed for less. Hell, men had killed for a horse and a canteen. He stopped at the general store and was loading supplies when a voice cut through the afternoon quiet. Elias Varn? Elias turned. Two men stood behind him, strangers, both dressed too well for Copper Ridge. City clothes, expensive boots. The kind of men who didn't belong here but acted like they owned the place anyway. Who's asking? Elias said. The taller one stepped forward. He had a thin face and cold eyes that cataloged everything. Name's Warren. This is my associate, Mr. Pike. We're looking for someone. Thought you might be able to help. Doubt it. Warren smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Woman, dark hair, thin build, might have arrived here recently. Might be using the name Quinn. Elias kept his face neutral. Lots of women have dark hair. This one's special. She's sick, mentally unwell. Her husband's very worried about her. Her husband? Richard Calloway. Important man back east. His wife had a breakdown, ran off with a substantial amount of money that doesn't belong to her. Warren's smile widened. We're here to bring her home, where she'll be taken care of properly. Elias set down the sack of flour he'd been holding. And if I don't know where she is, then we'll ask around. Small town like this, someone always knows something. Warren glanced toward the street, where a few people had stopped to watch. But it'd be easier if you just told us. Save everyone a lot of trouble. I don't know what you're talking about, Elias said flatly. Pike spoke for the first time, his voice rough. You're lying. Prove it. Warren held up a hand, stopping Pike from moving forward. Let's not be hasty. We're reasonable men, Mr. Varn. If you help us, there might be something in it for you. A finder's fee, shall we say. $500 for information leading to her recovery. Not interested. Think about it. $500 is a lot of money for a man like you. Elias felt his jaw tighten. A man like me? I mean, no offense. I'm simply saying, I know what you're saying. Elias stepped closer, and both men tensed. And here's what I'm saying. I don't know where your missing woman is, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you, so you can take your finder's fee and your reasonable offer and get the hell out of my town. Warren's expression hardened. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Elias turned his back on them, a calculated risk, and finished loading his wagon. He could feel their eyes on him the entire time, could sense Pike's hand hovering near whatever weapon he had hidden under his coat, but they didn't move. When Elias climbed onto the wagon and snapped the reins, Warren called out one last time. She stole from him, Mr. Varn. That makes her a thief. When we find her, and we will, she'll answer for it. Elias didn't look back. The ride to the cabin felt longer than it should have. His mind was racing, turning over possibilities. Warren and Pike weren't lawmen. Lawmen didn't offer finder's fees or make threats disguised as friendly conversation. They were hired muscle, which meant Richard Calloway had money and reach, and didn't care about doing things the legal way. When Elias reached the cabin, Alara was waiting outside. She took one look at his face and knew. They're here. Two of them, asking questions. Elias jumped down from the wagon. They'll be back. Alara wrapped her arms around herself. I should leave. If I'm not here, no. Elias, they'll hurt you to get to me. Let them try. He started unloading supplies, his movements sharp and angry. You're not running anymore. We're not giving them that. Then what do we do? Elias stopped, a sack of grain balanced on his shoulder. We get ready, and we don't give them anything to use against us. That night, Elias pulled out every weapon he owned, 2 rifles, a shotgun, a revolver that had been Sarah's, a hunting knife with a bone handle. He cleaned them methodically, checked the ammunition, set them where they could be reached quickly. Alara watched from the table, her face pale. You really think they'll try something? She asked. Men like that? Yeah, I do. Elias loaded the shotgun, the shells clicking into place with brutal finality. But they'll think twice if they know we're ready. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Too late. I'm already in it. He looked up, his eyes hard. And I'm not backing down. Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and crossed to where he sat, kneeling so they were eye level. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. You could hand me over, collect their money, go back to your life. This is my life now. That's not an answer. Elias set the shotgun down. You want the truth? I don't know. Maybe because someone needs to stand up for you. Maybe because I'm tired of watching people get pushed around by men with money and power. Maybe... He stopped, searching for words. Maybe because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like there's something worth fighting for. Alara's breath caught. Elias, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you how it is. She reached out slowly and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. I'm scared. I know. But I'm not running. Good. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, the fire crackling in the hearth. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Winter storms were coming, but for now, in this moment, they had warmth and walls and each other. It would have to be enough. The next day brought the first real test. Elias was checking the fence line when he saw them, Warren and Pike, riding up the path toward the cabin. He felt his pulse kick up, but he kept his movements calm and measured. He whistled sharply, a signal he and Alara had agreed on, then walked to meet them. Warren pulled up about 20 feet away. Pike stayed mounted, his hand resting on the pommel of his saddle. Too casual, too ready. Mr. Varn, Warren said pleasantly, beautiful property you have here. State your business. Direct. I like that. Warren dismounted, brushing trail dust from his coat. We've been making inquiries. Seems a woman matching our description was seen arriving in town a few weeks back, on a mail wagon. His eyes glinted. Purchased by you. Maybe, Warren smiled. See, that's interesting, because the wagon driver, Mr. Hoskins, he remembers quite clearly, said she had a sack over her head, said you took her anyway. Elias didn't respond. So, here's what I'm thinking, Warren continued. You've got her. She's here, right now, probably hiding inside that cabin, and you're going to let us take her back where she belongs. No, I'm not. Warren's smile faded. Don't be stupid about this. I'm not being stupid. I'm being clear. She's not going anywhere. Pike swung down from his horse, his hand dropping to his belt. You really want to die for a woman you barely know? I don't plan on dying at all. Then step aside. Elias heard the cabin door open behind him. He didn't turn around, but he knew Alara was there. He could feel her presence like heat at his back. Mr. Calloway wants his property returned, Warren said, his voice hardening. The money she stole, and the woman herself. She's not property, Alara said. Her voice was steady, stronger than Elias expected. And the money is mine, my inheritance. He's the thief, not me. Warren looked past Elias, his expression calculating. Mrs. Calloway, your husband is very worried about you. He just wants to help. He wants to control me. There's a difference. You're not well. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Alara stepped forward, coming to stand beside Elias. And I'm not going back. Pike moved fast, faster than Elias anticipated. He lunged forward, reaching for Alara. Elias reacted on instinct, stepping between them and driving his shoulder into Pike's chest. They went down hard, hitting the frozen ground in a tangle of limbs. Pike was bigger, but Elias had been fighting since he was old enough to throw a punch. He got an elbow into Pike's ribs, heard the man grunt, then rolled free and came up swinging. His fist connected with Pike's jaw, snapping his head back. Warren was shouting something, but Elias couldn't hear it over the blood pounding in his ears. Pike recovered quick, pulling a knife from his boot. The blade flashed in the weak sunlight. Elias backed up, his hands raised. "Don't do this." "Should have stayed out of it," Pike growled. He came in low and fast. Elias sidestepped, grabbed Pike's wrist, and twisted hard. The knife fell. Pike howled and swung wild. His fist caught Elias on the temple, and the world tilted sideways. Then there was a sharp crack, the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Everyone froze. Alara stood on the cabin steps, holding Sarah's revolver in both hands. It was pointed directly at Warren's chest. "Get away from him," she said. Warren raised his hand slowly. "Now, Mrs. Calloway, let's not—" "I said get away from him." Pike was still on the ground, cradling his wrist. Warren looked between Alara and Elias, calculating odds. Whatever he saw must not have favored him, because he took a step back. "This isn't over," Warren said. "Yes, it is." Alara's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed level. "You're going to get on your horses. You're going to leave. And you're going to tell Richard that if he sends anyone else, I'll go to the authorities. I have documents, proof of what he's done, and I'm not afraid to use them anymore. He'll never believe you." "Maybe not, but a federal judge might." Warren stared at her for a long moment. Then he jerked his head at Pike. "Let's go." Pike struggled to his feet, shooting Elias a look that promised violence. They mounted up, turned their horses, and rode back down the path. Elias watched until they disappeared into the trees. Only then did Alara lower the gun. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Elias crossed to her in 3 strides and took it gently, setting it aside. "You all right?" he asked. "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've never pointed a gun at anyone before." "You did good." "I was terrified." "I know. But you didn't let it stop you." He reached out and touched her arm. "That's what matters." Alara looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They'll come back." "Probably. With more men, legal papers maybe. Or worse. Then we'll be ready." "Elias, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm choosing." He said it firmly, leaving no room for argument. "Now come on, let's get inside. We need to figure out our next move." They spent the rest of the day planning. Alara retrieved the bank draft from its hiding place, a slim piece of paper that represented everything her father had built, everything Richard had tried to take. She also pulled out a packet of letters and documents she'd stolen before she ran. "These are from Richard's office," she explained, spreading them on the table. Correspondences with his business partners. Ledgers showing money transfers. He was sloppy toward the end, arrogant. He never thought I'd find them. Elias scanned the papers. Even with his limited education, he could see what they showed. A pattern of theft and fraud, money moved between accounts. To hide its origins, forged signatures. "This is evidence," he said. "Yes, but I don't know if it's enough. Richard has friends, judges, lawyers, politicians, men who owe him favors." Her voice went tight. "And I'm just his hysterical wife who ran away." "You're more than that." "Am I? In the eyes of the law?" Elias didn't have an answer. The law wasn't kind to women, especially women who went against their husbands. He'd seen it before. Seen women trapped in situations they couldn't escape because the law said they belonged to someone else. But there had to be a way. "We need help," he said finally. "Someone who knows the law. Someone who can make this stick." "Who?" Elias thought for a moment. "There's a man, Judge Morrison. He travels the circuit, handles cases in the smaller towns. He's fair, more fair than most." He looked at Alara. "If we can get to him, explain what happened, show him these documents, maybe he can help." "When does he come through?" "Not for another month, maybe longer." Alara's shoulders slumped. "We don't have that kind of time." "Then we go to him." What? Morrison's based out of Silver Creek, 3 days ride east. We take the documents, we take your testimony, and we make our case. That's insane. Warren and Pike could be watching the roads. Richard might have more men coming. We'd be exposed. We're exposed here too. Elias leaned forward. But if we run now, we're always running. If we fight this the right way, through the law, we end it. Alara stared at the document spread across the table. Her jaw worked like she was chewing on words she couldn't quite say. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, she said finally. You held a gun on 2 armed men this morning. You're stronger than you think. That was different. That was reacting. This is, she gestured helplessly. This is choosing to walk into the fire. Yeah, it is. Elias reached across the table and took her hand. But you're not walking alone. Alara looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to settle something inside her. All right, she said. We'll go to Silver Creek. They left 2 days later before dawn, when the world was still painted in shades of gray. Elias packed light, bedrolls, supplies, weapons. Alara carried the documents in a leather satchel that never left her shoulder. The ride was hard. Winter had locked the mountains in ice, and the trails were treacherous. They moved carefully, stopping often to rest the horses and scan the horizon for followers. On the second night, they made camp in a sheltered hollow, building a small fire that they kept low and hidden. Alara sat close to the flames, her arms wrapped around her knees. Tell me about her, she said quietly. Elias looked up from the coffee he was making. Who? Your wife, Sarah. He went still. No one had asked about Sarah in years. People in Copper Ridge knew better. Why? He asked. Because you talk in your sleep sometimes. You say her name. Elias poured the coffee, taking his time. We were married 8 years. She was... He stopped, trying to find words that wouldn't break open the wound. She was good, better than me, better than most people. How'd she die? Fever, came on fast. By the time I realized how bad it was, he shook his head. Doctor said there was nothing to be done. I sat with her for 3 days. Watched her slip away. Couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Alara was quiet for a moment. You blame yourself. Shouldn't I? I was supposed to protect her. You can't protect someone from illness. Maybe not, but I could have gotten her to a real doctor sooner. Could have taken her east where they have hospitals. Instead, He stopped, his throat tight. Instead, I kept thinking she'd get better, that we'd have more time. Elias, don't. The word came out harder than he meant. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. I've heard it before. Doesn't change anything. Alara shifted closer until their shoulders were almost touching. I wasn't going to say that. Then what? I was going to say I understand. Her voice was soft. What it's like to carry something that won't let you go. To feel like you failed someone who deserved better. Elias looked at her. In the firelight, her face was shadowed, but her eyes were clear. Your father? He asked. He died when I was 16. Heart gave out. I was there. She stared into the flames. I held his hand, told him I'd be all right, that he didn't need to worry. Her laugh was bitter. 6 years later, I married a man who spent every day proving I'd lied. You didn't know. Neither did you. About Sarah getting sick. She met his eyes. But we carry it anyway, because that's what people like us do. Elias didn't have an answer for that, so he just sat with her, sharing the silence and the weight of things they couldn't change. The third day brought them to Silver Creek just as the sun was setting. It was bigger than Copper Ridge, a real town with a main street, actual buildings, even a hotel. Elias led them to a boarding house on the edge of town, paid for a room, and got the horses settled. We'll find Morrison tomorrow, he said. Tonight we rest. But rest didn't come easy. Alara paced the small room, too wired to sit still. Elias sat on the bed cleaning his rifle, giving her space to work through whatever she needed to work through. Finally, she stopped and turned to him. What if he doesn't believe me? He will. You don't know that. I know you're telling the truth, and Morrison's good at seeing truth when it's in front of him. And if he's not? If Richard's reach extends this far? Elias set the rifle aside. Then we figure something else out. But we don't give up. Alara crossed her arms, her expression fierce. I won't go back to him. I'd rather die first. It won't come to that. You can't promise that. No, Elias admitted, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't. Something in her expression softened. She moved across the room and sat beside him on the bed, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. Why are you so good to me? She asked. I'm not. You are. You took me in when no one else would. You protected me. You believed me when you had no reason to. She turned to face him fully. Why? Elias struggled to find the right words. Because someone should. Because you deserve it. Because... He stopped, realizing he was about to say something he wasn't sure he was ready to say. Because what? He looked at her, really looked at her. At the strength in her eyes, the determined set of her jaw, the way she'd grown from the broken woman in a sack to someone who could stare down armed men without flinching. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about duty or charity or whatever it started as, he said quietly, and became about you, just you. Alara's breath caught. Elias. You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything to change. I needed you to know. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Alara reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. It's not just you, she whispered. I feel it too. This thing between us. I'm scared of it. I know. I don't know how to trust it, how to trust anyone. Then don't trust me yet. Just stay. Let me prove it. Alara's eyes searched his face. Whatever she found there must have been enough, because she leaned forward slowly and rested her forehead against his. They sat like that, breathing the same air, until the darkness outside turned to dawn. Morning came with this kind of cold that made your bones ache. Elias woke first, untangling himself carefully from where Alara had fallen asleep against his shoulder sometime during the night. She stirred, but didn't wake, her face peaceful in a way he'd never seen before. He let her sleep while he dressed and went downstairs to ask about Judge Morrison. The boarding house owner, a heavy-set woman named Mrs. Talbot, pointed him toward the courthouse at the end of Main Street. Judge is hearing cases today, she said, eyeing Elias with undisguised curiosity. You in some kind of trouble? Looking to prevent it, Elias said, and left before she could ask more questions. When he returned to the room, Alara was awake, splashing water on her face from the basin. She'd changed into the cleanest dress she had. Still worn, still patched in places, but respectable enough. Morrison's at the courthouse, Elias said. We should go now before it gets crowded. Alara dried her face, her movements precise and controlled. But Elias could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand shook slightly when she reached for the leather satchel containing the documents. You ready? He asked. No, but I don't think I ever will be. She straightened her spine, forcing steel into her voice. Let's go. The courthouse was a 2-story brick building that looked like it had been transplanted from somewhere back east. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and furniture polish. A clerk sat behind a desk, scribbling in a ledger. Help you? He asked without looking up. Need to speak with Judge Morrison, Elias said. He's in session. You'll have to wait. It's urgent. The clerk finally looked up, his expression sour. Everything's urgent. Take a seat. They sat on a hard wooden bench in the hallway, listening to muffled voices from behind the courtroom doors. Other people came and went. A nervous-looking farmer, a woman with 2 children who wouldn't stop squirming, a lawyer in a suit that had seen better days. An hour passed. Then another. Alara's leg bounced with nervous energy. Elias wanted to reach over and still it, but he knew she needed to channel the fear somewhere. Finally, the courtroom doors opened and people began filing out. The clerk gestured to them. Judge will see you now, but make it quick. He's got a full docket. They entered a room that was smaller than Elias expected. Judge Morrison sat behind a raised desk, reading through papers. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When he looked up and saw them, something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Though Elias was certain they'd never met. Mr. Varn, Morrison said, I wondered when you'd turn up. Elias felt Alara stiffen beside him. You know who I am? Had a visitor 2 days ago, man named Warren. Said you'd kidnapped a woman, were holding her against her will. Morrison set down his papers. Said there'd be a reward for information about your whereabouts. That's not what happened, Alara said quickly. Morrison's gaze shifted to her. And you are? Alara Quinn, formerly Alara Calloway. She stepped forward, her chin raised. I'm the woman Warren was looking for, and I'm here of my own free will. Is that so? Morrison leaned back in his chair. Mr. Warren painted a different picture. Said your husband's been searching for you. Said you're unwell, that you stole money and ran. My husband is a liar and a thief, Alara said, her voice steady. And I can prove it. She set the leather satchel on Morrison's desk and began pulling out documents, letters, ledgers, bank statements. Morrison watched her with an expression that gave nothing away. These show a pattern of fraud, Alara explained. Richard Calloway, my husband, has been embezzling funds from his clients for years, moving money between accounts, forging signatures, creating false records. When I discovered what he was doing, I took what was rightfully mine and left. Morrison picked up one of the ledgers, scanning the entries. These are serious allegations. They're true. Every word. Alara's hands gripped the edge of the desk. He controlled every aspect of my life. What I wore, where I went, who I spoke to. He convinced me I was losing my mind, that I couldn't trust my own memories. And when I finally saw the truth, when I tried to leave, he had me declared unfit and sold to a mail-order bride agency like I was livestock. And Mr. Varn here saved my life. Alara glanced at Elias. He took me in when no one else would, protected me, believed me when I had no reason to expect anyone would. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. You understand what you're asking me to do? If I accept these documents, if I open an investigation into Richard Calloway, you'll be making a powerful enemy. I already have, Alara said, but I'm done running. I'm done letting him control my life. And if he comes after you? Men like Calloway don't take kindly to being exposed. Then I'll face him. Her voice didn't waver. I'll face whatever comes. But I won't hide anymore. Morrison studied her face, then looked at Elias. You're willing to stand with her, whatever the consequences? Yes, Elias said simply. Even if it means violence, legal trouble, losing everything? I've already lost everything that mattered once. I'm not doing it again. Morrison drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll review these documents. If they support your claims, I'll file the appropriate warrants and summons. But understand, this won't be quick, and it won't be easy. Calloway will fight back. I know, Alara said. You'll need to stay where I can reach you. Can't have you disappearing before this goes to trial. We'll be at the boarding house, Mrs. Talbot's place. Good. Morrison gathered the documents into a neat pile. Give me 3 days to go through all this. Then we'll talk about next steps. They left the courthouse with a strange mixture of relief and dread. 3 days felt like both forever and not nearly enough time. As they walked back toward the boarding house, Alara said, Do you think he believed me? Hard to tell with Morrison, but he took the documents. That's something. What if Richard gets to him first, offers him money, or Morrison's not the type to be bought? Elias glanced at her. You did good in there, stood your ground. I was terrified. Didn't show. Alara managed a weak smile. I'm getting better at hiding it. They spent the rest of the day trying to stay busy. Elias checked on the horses, restocked their supplies, cleaned his weapons for the 3rd time. Alara sat in the room reading a newspaper someone had left behind, though Elias doubted she was actually absorbing any of it. That evening, they ate dinner at a small restaurant down the street. The food was decent, roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, but neither of them had much appetite. 3 days, Alara said, pushing food around her plate. What are we supposed to do for 3 days? Wait, try not to think about it too much. That's like telling someone not to think about a bear that's chasing them. Elias almost smiled. Fair point. They were walking back to the boarding house when Elias spotted them, 2 men standing across the street, watching. Not Warren and Pike, different men, but the way they stood, the way they tracked Alara's movements, told Elias everything he needed to know. Don't look, he said quietly, taking Alara's arm. But we're being followed. Her breath hitched. How many? 2 that I can see. Might be more. What do we do? Keep walking, natural, like we don't know they're there. They made it back to the boarding house without incident, but Elias could feel eyes on them the entire way. Once inside, he locked the door and moved to the window, peering through the curtain. The two men had taken up positions across the street, not even trying to hide anymore. They're just watching, Elias said. For now. Alara sat on the bed, her face pale. Richard sent them. Probably. How did they find us so fast? Warren must have told him where we were heading, or they had people watching the roads. Elias let the curtain fall. Doesn't matter. What matters is they're here, and they know where we are. Should we leave? Find somewhere else to stay? No. If we run, Morrison won't be able to reach us, and it'll look like we're guilty of something. He moved away from the window, his mind working through options. We stay put, but we stay alert. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He sat in a chair near the door with his rifle across his lap, watching the shadows under the door for movement. Alara dozed fitfully on the bed, jerking awake every hour or so with wide, frightened eyes. Around 3 a.m, Elias heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate. Someone testing doors. He stood silently, moving to position himself between the door and Alara. The footsteps stopped outside their room. A long pause. Then they moved on. Elias waited 10 minutes before sitting back down, his heart still pounding. Dawn brought no relief. The men across the street were still there, joined now by a third. They'd set up a rotation, making it clear they weren't going anywhere. Mrs. Talbot noticed when she brought up breakfast. "Those men been there all night," she said, setting down a tray of coffee and toast. "You in some kind of trouble?" "Nothing we can't handle," Elias said. Mrs. Talbot gave Alara a long look. "You need anything, you let me know. I don't like men who make women scared in my house." After she left, Alara said, "She's kind." "Most people are, if you give them a chance." Richard used to say that kindness was weakness, that people only helped others when they wanted something in return. Richard was wrong about a lot of things. Alara wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I keep thinking about what Morrison said, about making a powerful enemy. What if this ruins your life, Elias? What if Richard destroys everything you have because of me?" "I don't have much to destroy. You have your home, your reputation, the town. The town can hang for all I care, and the cabin's just wood and nails." He looked at her directly. "You're what matters, you and making sure that bastard pays for what he did." Alara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide." The second day was worse. The men watching them grew bolder, standing in plain view, making sure Elias and Alara knew they were trapped. When Elias tried to leave the boarding house to check on the horses, 2 of them followed him, staying close enough to be threatening. "Nice animals you got there," one of them said. He was younger than the others, with a scar across his cheek. "Be a shame if something happened to them." Elias didn't take the bait. He finished checking the horses and walked back to the boarding house, the men trailing behind like wolves following wounded prey. That evening, there was a knock at the door. Elias answered it to find the clerk from the courthouse, looking nervous. "Judge Morrison wants to see you," he said. "Both of you, tomorrow morning, first thing." "Did he say why?" "Just said it was urgent." The clerk glanced past Elias toward the window where the watching men were visible. "And he said to be careful. There's been some interest in your case." "What kind of interest?" "The kind that comes with money and influence." The clerk lowered his voice. "Judge wanted me to tell you, don't trust anyone, and watch your backs." He left quickly, practically running down the stairs. Elias closed the door and turned to Alara. "Something's happening." "Is that good or bad?" "Don't know yet." That night was the longest yet. Elias dozed in the chair, jerking awake at every sound. Around midnight, he heard glass breaking somewhere downstairs. Shouts. The sound of Mrs. Talbot's voice raised in anger. Elias grabbed his rifle and eased the door open. The hallway was dark and empty. He moved to the stairs, listening. "Don't care who sent you. This is my establishment, and you'll get out, or I'll fetch the sheriff." A man's voice, smooth and cold. "We just want to talk to your guests. The couple in room 4. They're sleeping, and you're leaving. Now." "Mrs. Talbot." I'd hate for anything unfortunate to happen to this fine establishment. Elias came down the stairs with his rifle raised. She said, "Leave." 3 men stood in the front room, not the ones who'd been watching, but new faces. Professional, dangerous. The one doing the talking wore an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Varn," he said pleasantly, "my employer would like a word." "Tell your employer to go to hell. He's offering you money, quite a lot of it. All you have to do is convince Mrs. Calloway to return home voluntarily. She's not going anywhere. $10,000, Mr. Varn. Think about what you could do with that kind of money. I'm thinking I could shoot you and sleep just fine tonight." The man's smile widened. "Violence won't solve this. We're prepared to be patient, but our patience isn't infinite." "Neither is mine. You've got 10 seconds to get out before I start shooting." The man held up his hands in mock surrender. "We're leaving. But think about our offer. $10,000. It's more money than a man like you will see in a lifetime." They left, but their words hung in the air like poison. Mrs. Talbot locked the door behind them, her hands shaking. "I don't scare easy, but those men—" "I know," Elias said. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this. Not your fault, but maybe you and your lady friend should sleep somewhere else tonight, just to be safe." Elias nodded. He went back upstairs where Alara was standing in the doorway, her face white. "I heard," she said. $10,000. I'm not taking it. That's more money than— I don't care if it's $1 million. I'm not selling you out." He set the rifle down. "Pack your things. We're leaving." "Where will we go?" "Somewhere they won't look. At least until we meet with Morrison tomorrow." They gathered their belongings quickly and slipped out the back entrance. The horses were still in the stable, untouched. Elias saddled them by moonlight while Alara kept watch. They rode out of Silver Creek heading north, away from the main roads. Elias knew a place, an old line shack he'd used years ago when he worked trail drives. It would be cold and bare, but it would be hidden. They reached it just before dawn. The shack was exactly as he remembered. 1 room, dirt floor, a fireplace that probably didn't work right, but it had walls and a roof and no one knew about it. Elias got a fire going while Alara spread out their bedrolls. She was exhausted, swaying on her feet. "Sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch. You need to sleep too." "I will, later." But he didn't. He sat by the door with his rifle, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold, thinking about what the man in the suit had said. $10,000. A fortune. Enough to start over, build a real life. And he'd turned it down without a second thought. 3 years ago, hell, 3 months ago, he might have taken it. Not because he was greedy, but because he'd had nothing to live for except survival. Now he had something, someone, and he'd burn the money before he'd betray her. Around mid-morning, Alara woke up. She joined him by the door, handing him cold biscuits from their supplies. "What time do we need to be at the courthouse?" she asked. "Morrison said first thing. We should head back around noon, give ourselves time." "Think those men will still be there?" "Count on it." Alara chewed her biscuit slowly. "I've been thinking about what they offered you." "Don't." $10,000, Elias. You could, I said don't. He looked at her. "I don't want their money. I don't want anything from them. I want you safe and Richard Calloway behind bars. That's it." "But, no buts. This isn't up for debate." Alara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Why are you so stubborn?" "Could ask you the same thing." That got a small smile. "I suppose we're both difficult." "Suppose so." They rode back into Silver Creek at noon, entering from the east to avoid the boarding house. The men who'd been watching were still there, but they'd shifted position, clearly confused about where their quarry had gone. Elias and Alara tied their horses behind the courthouse and slipped in through a side entrance. The clerk saw them and gestured frantically. "Judge is waiting, hurry!" Morrison's office was cramped and filled with books. He looked up when they entered, his expression grim. "Shut the door," he said. Elias did. Morrison stood and moved to the window, peering through the blinds. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest." "We know," Alara said. "There are men watching us, following us." "More than that. I've received 3 visits in the past 2 days. First from a lawyer representing Richard Calloway, claiming you're mentally incompetent and demanding I remand you to his custody. Second, from a federal marshal with a warrant for your arrest on charges of theft. Alara's face went white. A federal marshal? Third visit was from a man claiming to be a doctor who'd treated you. Said you're delusional, prone to violent outbursts, a danger to yourself and others. That's all lies, Alara said, her voice shaking. All of it. I know. Morrison turned from the window. I've been a judge for 30 years. I know a coordinated attack when I see one. Calloway's throwing everything at this, trying to discredit you before you can speak. So what do we do? Elias asked. We move fast. I've reviewed your documents. They're damning. More than enough to open an investigation. But if that federal warrant is real, I can't ignore it. I'd have to take Mrs. Calloway into custody. Is it real? Alara asked. That's the question. The marshal had the right papers, right seals, but something felt off about him, too eager, too polished. Morrison sat back down. I sent a telegraph to the Federal Circuit Office to verify. Should hear back today. And if the warrant's real, then we fight it in court, but it'll take time. Time Calloway will use against you. Alara sat down heavily. He's going to win. He has the money, the connections, the power. We can't beat that. The hell we can't, Elias said. Morrison nodded. Your husband made a mistake. He got greedy, pushed too hard, too fast. Men like that, they think they're untouchable, but they get sloppy. He tapped the documents on his desk. These prove fraud, multiple counts. If I can get this in front of the right people. There was a knock at the door. The clerk stuck his head in. Judge, the federal marshal's back. Says he needs an answer about Mrs. Calloway. Morrison's jaw tightened. Tell him I'm still reviewing the matter. He says he's not leaving without her. Then he's going to be disappointed. The clerk withdrew. Morrison stood and reached for his coat. Both of you stay here. Don't leave this office. I'm going to have a conversation with this marshal. And if he doesn't back down, Elias asked, then we'll find out how real that warrant is the hard way. Morrison left, shutting the door behind him. Elias moved to the window, watching the street below. He could see the marshal, a tall man with a thick mustache and a badge that caught the light. He was talking to Morrison, gesturing angrily. This is bad, Alara whispered. If they take me, they're not taking you. Elias, if that warrant's real, you can't stop them. You'd be breaking federal law. I don't care. You should care. You could go to prison, or worse. Elias turned from the window. You think I'm letting them drag you back to him? After everything? I think you've done enough, more than enough. I won't let you destroy your life for me. Too late. Already decided. Alara stood, crossing to him. Listen to me. If it comes down to it, if they try to arrest me, you let them. You understand? You don't fight. You don't resist. No. Yes. Her voice was fierce. I can survive Richard. I survived him for 6 years, but I can't. Her voice broke. I can't have your blood on my hands. I won't. Before Elias could respond, the door burst open. The marshal strode in, 2 deputies behind him. Alara Calloway, he said formally, you're under arrest for grand theft and fraud. Come quietly, and this doesn't have to get ugly. Alara stepped forward, her chin raised. I'll come. No, Elias said, moving to block her path. The marshal's hand dropped to his gun. Don't make this worse, friend. Show me the warrant. Morrison's voice cut through the tension. He'd followed the marshal in, his face red with anger. I want to see the actual warrant, not a copy, the original. The marshal pulled a folded document from his coat and handed it over. Morrison read it carefully, his expression darkening. This is fake, he said finally. The marshal's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I said it's fake. The seal's wrong, the signature's wrong, and I just received confirmation from the Federal Circuit Office. They never issued a warrant for Alara Calloway. The marshal's hand moved toward his gun. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you a fraud, and I'm placing you under arrest for impersonating a federal officer. Everything happened fast after that. The fake marshal drew his gun. Elias moved without thinking, tackling Alara to the ground as gunfire erupted. One of the deputies went for his weapon, but Morrison was faster, producing a small pistol from his desk drawer. "Drop it," Morrison shouted. For a moment, no one moved. Then the fake marshal bolted for the door. His deputies followed, running like the hounds of hell were on their heels. Morrison let them go, his pistol still raised. When the sound of their footsteps faded, he lowered it slowly. "Well," he said, "that answers that question." Elias helped Alara to her feet. She was shaking, her face white, but her eyes were blazing. "He faked a federal warrant," she said. "Richard faked a federal warrant, and just committed about 6 different felonies doing it," Morrison said. He sat down, suddenly looking every one of his 60-plus years. "This changes everything." "How?" Elias asked. "Because now we have him. Impersonating a federal officer is serious business, and I've got witnesses." Morrison looked at them both. "I'm filing charges against Richard Calloway, against those fake lawmen, against anyone involved in this fraud, and I'm putting out real warrants for their arrest." Alara sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. Elias thought she was crying, but when she looked up, she was laughing. A wild, slightly hysterical sound. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "Not yet," Morrison cautioned. "This is just the beginning. Calloway will fight back. He'll hire lawyers, call in favors, try to bury this. But we've got momentum now, and we've got the truth." Elias put a hand on Alara's shoulder. "We've got more than that. We've got proof he's willing to break the law to get what he wants, that he sent armed men to kidnap you. That won't look good in front of a jury." Morrison nodded. "I'll need you both to give formal statements. Everything that happened, from the beginning. We're building a case, and we need it airtight." "How long?" Alara asked. "Weeks, maybe months. These things move slow." "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, you stay close, stay safe, and you trust that the law, the real law, is finally on your side." They left the courthouse as the sun was setting, exhausted but alive with something that felt dangerously close to hope. The men who'd been watching the boarding house were gone, scattered like roaches when the light came on. Elias and Alara didn't go back to Mrs. Talbot's. Instead, they found a small hotel on the far edge of town, paid for a week in advance, and locked themselves in. That night, sitting by the window watching the stars come out, Alara said, "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe there isn't another shoe. There's always another shoe." Elias turned from the window. "Then we'll deal with it when it drops, together." Alara looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood and crossed the room, taking his hands in hers. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." "All right." She took a breath. "When I was with Richard, I convinced myself I didn't deserve better, that the way he treated me was normal, that love was supposed to hurt." Her grip tightened. "But you've shown me something different. You've been patient and kind and strong without being cruel. You've protected me without trying to own me. And somewhere in all of this, I stopped being afraid of you and started being afraid of losing you." Elias started to speak, but she held up a hand. "I don't know if I'm ready for what that means. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I know that when I think about the future, about what comes after all this is over, I can't imagine it without you in it. Alara, I'm not asking for promises. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that you matter, that this," she gestured between them, "whatever this is, it matters to me." Elias pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She fit against him like she'd been made for that exact space. "It matters to me too," he said quietly. "More than I know how to say." They stood like that for a long time. Two people who'd been broken by life finding something whole in each other. Outside, the world kept turning. Richard Calloway was still out there, still dangerous, still fighting. But in that moment, in that small hotel room in Silver Creek, Elias and Alara had something he couldn't touch. They had each other. And for now, that was enough. The week that followed felt suspended in time, caught between relief and the creeping certainty that Richard Calloway wouldn't go quietly. Elias and Alara gave their statements to Judge Morrison, hours of testimony, every detail documented. Morrison worked methodically, building his case like a man stacking stones for a wall that needed to hold against a flood. On the 4th day, a telegram arrived from back east. Morrison read it twice before calling them to his office. "Calloway's lawyers have filed a motion to dismiss," he said, sliding the paper across his desk, "claiming lack of jurisdiction, procedural errors, mental incompetence of the witness, every trick in the book. Will it work? Elara asked. Not if I can help it, but it'll slow things down. They're trying to drag this out, wear us down, make you give up. I'm not giving up, Elara said. Morrison nodded. Good, because I've got news that might help. The federal office is sending a real marshal to investigate the impersonation incident, a man named Jacob Hayes. He's got a reputation for being thorough and incorruptible. If anyone can cut through Calloway's lawyers, it's him. When does he arrive? Elias asked. 2 weeks. Maybe sooner if we're lucky. 2 weeks. Elias saw Elara's shoulders tense, saw the fear flicker across her face before she buried it. In the meantime, Morrison continued, I'd suggest you both stay out of sight. Calloway's men are still in town. Saw them at the saloon last night, asking questions. They're not giving up either. That evening, Elias and Elara moved again, this time to a small house on the outskirts of Silver Creek that Morrison's sister rented out. It was modest but secure, with good sight lines and only one approach road. Elias spent an afternoon setting up precautions, a bell on the gate, tripwires around the perimeter, his rifle always within reach. Elara watched him work with an expression he couldn't quite read. You think they'll come here? She asked. Rather be ready and wrong than the other way around. She wrapped her shawl tighter against the wind. I hate this. Hiding. Waiting. Feeling like prey. I know. When does it end, Elias? When do we get to stop running? He straightened from the tripwire he was setting, wiping dirt from his hands. When the law catches up with him. When a judge puts him in chains. When you're free. He paused. However long that takes. And if it takes years, if he finds some way to wriggle out of this, then we deal with it. But we don't assume he's won before the fight's even finished. Elara looked away, toward the mountains visible in the distance. Sometimes I think about just disappearing, taking the money and going somewhere he'd never find me. California, maybe. Or Mexico. You could do that. But I won't. Because if I run now, he wins. He gets to keep lying, keep stealing, keep destroying people. And her voice cracked. I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Elias crossed to her, taking her cold hands in his. You're doing the right thing, the hard thing. That counts for something. Does it? Because right now it just feels like I'm dragging you down with me. You're not dragging me anywhere I don't want to go. She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Why? Why do you keep choosing this? Choosing me? Elias didn't have easy words for what he felt. 3 years of grief had taught him that some things couldn't be explained, only shown. So instead of trying to explain, he pulled her close and held her while the wind bit at them both and the sun sank behind the peaks. The days settled into a new routine. Elias kept watch, maintained their defenses, made supply runs into town when necessary. Elara cooked, mended, read every book Morrison lent them. They were careful with each other, circling around the thing growing between them like people approaching a fire, wanting warmth, but afraid of burns. Nights were harder. Elara's nightmares came back, worse than before. She'd wake gasping, sometimes screaming, and Elias would be there, talking her down from whatever horror her mind had conjured. Tell me something real, she'd whisper in the dark. Something that proves this isn't another one of his tricks. So Elias would talk. About Sarah, about the farm he'd grown up on, about the first horse he'd ever broken. Small, true things. Anchors to pull her back. One night, about 10 days into their wait, Elara didn't wake screaming. Instead, Elias woke to find her sitting at the window, staring out at the moonlit yard. Can't sleep? He asked. Didn't want to. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. She hugged her knees to her chest. Richard, standing over me, telling me I'm worthless, that no one will believe me, that I belong to him. Elias sat beside her on the floor. He's not here. I know. But he's in my head. He put himself there, piece by piece, year after year, and I don't know how to get him out. Time, maybe, and distance, and proving him wrong. What if I can't prove him wrong? What if he's right? What if I am broken? What if... Stop. Elias took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. You're not broken. You're not worthless. And you sure as hell don't belong to anyone. You hear me? Alara's eyes filled with tears. How can you be so sure? Because I see you, the real you, not the person he tried to turn you into. His voice softened. I see someone strong enough to run when running was the only choice. Someone brave enough to fight when fighting seemed impossible. Someone who holds a gun steady when she's terrified, who stands in front of a judge and tells the truth even when lying would be easier. Elias, I'm not done. I see someone who makes terrible coffee but excellent bread. Someone who reads out loud when she thinks I'm not listening. Someone who cries for other people's pain but won't admit to her own. He brushed a tear from her cheek. I see someone I'd walk through fire for, and if Richard Calloway told you you're worthless, then Richard Calloway is a fool and a liar. Alara made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She leaned into him, her forehead against his shoulder, and he held her while she cried, really cried, for the first time since he'd known her. Not the silent tears she tried to hide, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. When she finally quieted, she didn't pull away. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Elias's heart stuttered. Why does it terrify you? Because the last time I loved someone, they used it to destroy me. And I can't. I'm not him, Elias said quietly. I know you've got no reason to believe that yet, but I'm not him, and I'll spend however long it takes proving it, if you'll let me. Alara pulled back just enough to look at him. In the moonlight, her face was pale and beautiful and heartbreaking. I want to believe you, she said. I want that more than anything. Then believe me, or don't. Either way, I'm still here. She kissed him then, tentative at first, testing, then deeper when he didn't pull away. It wasn't perfect. Their noses bumped. Her tears made everything salt slick, but it was real and honest and entirely theirs. When they broke apart, Alara was smiling, a real smile, small and fragile but genuine. That was my first kiss in 3 years, she said. First one I actually wanted. Was it all right? It was better than all right. They stayed at the window until dawn, talking quietly, learning the shape of each other's silences. And when the sun came up, something had shifted between them. The careful distance was gone, replaced by something warmer and more solid. 2 days later, Marshall Hayes arrived. He was younger than Elias expected, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Morrison introduced them in his office, and Hayes got straight to business. I've read the statements, he said, reviewed the documents, and I've been asking questions back east. Richard Calloway is a well-connected man with friends in high places, but he's also sloppy, left a trail a blind man could follow. What kind of trail? Alara asked. Hayes pulled out a notebook. Wire transfers that don't match his books. Forged signatures on contracts. Witness testimony from his clerks about documents they were told to destroy. He looked at Alara. And a pattern of behavior toward you that several people noticed but no one reported. Servants, neighbors. Even his business partner mentioned that you seemed nervous around your husband. Will they testify? Elias asked. Some will. Some won't. They're afraid of him. But I've got enough to bring charges. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and now federal crimes related to the fake warrant. Hayes closed his notebook. I'm issuing an arrest warrant for Richard Calloway and for the men who impersonated federal officers. Alara's hand found Elias's, gripping tight. When? Warrant goes out today. If Calloway's smart, he'll turn himself in. Get a lawyer. Try to make a deal. And if he's not smart? Hayes's expression hardened. Then I'll bring him in myself, one way or another. That night, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He checked the perimeter 3 times, finding nothing, but the unease stayed with him, settling in his gut like a stone. Around midnight, the warning bell on the gate rang. Elias was up and armed in seconds, moving to the window. Alara stood behind him, her face pale. How many? She whispered. Can't tell. Stay here. Elias, stay here. He moved to the door, easing it open. The yard was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. The bell rang again, insistent. Then a voice called out, Elias Varn, I know you're in there. Elias felt his blood go cold. He knew that voice, knew it from Alara's descriptions, from the arrogant confidence that dripped from every word. Richard Calloway had come himself. I'm not here to fight, Calloway called. I just want to talk to my wife, 5 minutes, then I'll leave peacefully. Elias looked back at Alara. She'd gone white as snow, her whole body trembling. "Don't," she said. "Please don't let him near me." "I won't." Elias moved to the window, rifle in hand. "You need to leave, Calloway. There's a warrant out for your arrest. Best thing you can do is turn yourself in." A warrant based on lies and forged documents. Calloway's voice was smooth, reasonable. "I'm a victim here, Mr. Varn. My mentally unwell wife stole from me and ran. All I want is to bring her home, get her the help she needs." "She doesn't need your help. She needs you gone." "Let her tell me that. Let me see her. Speak to her. If she still wants to stay with you after that, I'll go. You have my word." Elias looked at Alara again. She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "Your word doesn't mean anything," Elias called back. "Now leave, before this gets ugly." There was a pause. Then Calloway's voice changed, still smooth, but with an edge underneath. "I'm trying to be reasonable, Mr. Varn, but I can be unreasonable too. I have 10 men with me, armed men. You're outnumbered and outgunned, so I'm going to give you one more chance. Send my wife out, or we come in and take her. Come ahead and try." Elias heard movement in the darkness, boots on gravel, the click of hammers being pulled back. He counted shadows. Calloway hadn't been lying, at least 8 men, maybe more. "Alara," he said quietly, not looking away from the window. "There's a root cellar behind the pantry. Get down there. Lock it from inside. Don't come out until you hear my voice. Understand? I'm not leaving you to do it now." For once she didn't argue. He heard her move, heard the scrape of the cellar door opening. Then silence. Elias took a breath, steadying himself. 8 against 1. Bad odds. But he'd faced worse and lived, and these men weren't soldiers. They were hired guns. Professionals maybe, but professionals got sloppy when they thought they had the advantage. "Last chance, Varn," Calloway shouted. "Send her out, or—" Elias fired through the window, not at anyone, just a warning shot into the dirt. The crack of the rifle split the night. "Next one's through a chest," he shouted back. "Leave now or start counting your dead." The response was immediate. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, bullets punching through the thin walls of the house. Elias dropped flat, rolling away from the window. Glass shattered, wood splintered, the air filled with smoke and noise. Elias crawled to a different window, rose just high enough to aim, and fired. One of the shadows went down with a cry. He dropped again, moving before return fire could find him. This was frontier justice. Brutal, desperate, survival measured in seconds. He made it to the back room, smashed out a window, and fired twice more. Another man fell. But there were still too many, and they were spreading out, surrounding the house. Elias reloaded with shaking hands. The house wouldn't hold. They'd burn it, or simply shoot through every wall until there was nothing left standing. He needed an advantage. Needed something they wouldn't expect. Then he heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses coming fast. The gunfire faltered. Someone shouted. The hoofbeats grew louder. Elias risked a look through the shattered window and saw them, Marshal Hayes and 6 deputies, riding in with rifles raised. Behind them, more men, townspeople, farmers. Even Walt Kerrigan from Copper Ridge, looking grim and determined. "Federal Marshal," Hayes's voice boomed through the night. "Drop your weapons. You're surrounded." For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of Calloway's men threw down his gun and raised his hands. Another followed, then another. Richard Calloway stood in the center of the yard, perfectly still. Even in the darkness, Elias could see the fury radiating off him. "This isn't over," Calloway said. Hayes dismounted, walking straight up to him. "Richard Calloway, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and about 6 other charges I'll think of on the ride back. Put your hands behind your head. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A criminal, a coward, and a man who just made the stupidest decision of his life." Hayes grabbed Calloway's arm, forcing him around. "I asked nicely. Now I'm telling you. Hands behind your head." Calloway complied, but the look he shot toward the house was pure venom. "Tell my wife this isn't finished. Tell her she'll never be free of me." "I'll tell her you're going to prison," Hayes said, snapping cuffs on him. "Where you belong." Elias lowered his rifle, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. He watched as Hayes and his deputies rounded up the rest of Calloway's men, disarming them, binding their hands. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes. Then they were gone, riding back toward Silver Creek with their prisoners in tow. Walt Kerrigan stayed behind, dismounting slowly. He looked at the bullet-riddled house and whistled low. "Hell of a night," he said. Elias stepped out onto the porch. "What are you doing here, Walt?" Morrison sent word that trouble might be coming, asked for volunteers. Walt shrugged. "Figured you could use the help. Besides," he looked uncomfortable. "I was wrong about you. About her. Should have minded my own business back in Copper Ridge. Water under the bridge. Maybe. But I wanted to say it anyway." Walt mounted up again. "You two take care, and if you need anything at all, you let us know." He rode off before Elias could respond. Elias went back inside and opened the cellar door. "Elara? It's safe. You can come out." She emerged slowly, her face streaked with tears and dirt. When she saw him, she ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I heard the gunshots. I thought they'd killed you." "I'm all right. Little banged up, but all right." "Richard?" "Arrested. Hayes took him. Took all of them." Elara pulled back, her eyes wide. "He's really gone? He's really gone." She started to shake, her whole body trembling with reaction. Elias guided her to a chair before her legs gave out. He poured her water from the pitcher, miraculously unbroken, and made her drink. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." "Not quite. There's still the trial. But the hard part, the running, the hiding, yeah, that's over." Elara looked around at the destroyed house, shattered windows, splintered walls, bullet holes everywhere. "We can't stay here." "No. But Morrison's sister has another property. Bigger, safer. We can move there tomorrow." "And then what?" Elias knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Then we wait for the trial. We testify. We watch Richard Calloway get what he deserves. And then," he paused, "then we figure out what comes next. Together? If you want." Elara's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she was smiling. "I want." They spent the rest of the night cleaning up what they could, boarding over the worst of the damage. By dawn, the house looked like a war zone, but they'd salvaged what mattered: the documents, their belongings, each other. Morrison arrived mid-morning with a wagon. "Heard you had some excitement." "Could say that," Elias replied. "Hayes got Calloway to Silver Creek. He's in a cell, awaiting transport to the territorial prison. His lawyers are already screaming about illegal detention and improper procedure." "Will it work?" Elara asked. "Not a chance. Hayes did everything by the book. And with the charges stacking up, plus about a dozen witnesses to last night's assault, Calloway's not talking his way out of this one." Morrison helped them load the wagon. "Trial's set for 6 weeks from now, federal court in Denver. You'll both need to testify." "We'll be there," Elias said. They moved to Morrison's sister's property, a sturdy house with thick walls and good locks. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Lawyers came and went, asking questions, taking statements. Hayes kept them updated on the case. More charges were added, more evidence uncovered. Richard Calloway's empire was crumbling piece by piece. Elara testified 3 times before the trial even started. Depositions, preliminary hearings, meetings with prosecutors. Each time was hard. Each time she came back exhausted and shaken. But each time she was a little bit stronger. Elias was there for all of it, standing beside her, holding her hand when the memories got too sharp, reminding her that she was believed, that she mattered, that she was winning. 2 weeks before the trial, Elara received a letter. It was from her father's old law firm, forwarded through multiple channels before finally reaching her. The partner who'd written it expressed shock at what had happened, apologized for not recognizing the signs sooner, and included documentation proving that her inheritance, all of it, was legally hers. Richard had no claim to it, never had. That night, Elara sat at the table with the letter in front of her, crying quietly. "I thought I'd lost everything," she said. "Everything my father built, everything he wanted me to have." "You didn't lose it. You saved it." Elias sat beside her. "Your father would be proud of you." "You think so?" "I know so. You fought for what was yours, for what was right. That takes courage most people don't have." Elara wiped her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could. You're stronger than you think." "Maybe. I'm glad I didn't have to find out. She looked at him. What happens after the trial? After all this is finished? Elias had been thinking about that. Thinking about it a lot. Depends on what you want. What I want is... She hesitated. I want to build something good, something that lasts, but I don't want to do it alone. You won't be alone. I'm with you. Whatever you want to build, wherever you want to go. Even if I want to go back to Copper Ridge? That surprised him. Why would you want to go back there? Because it's where this started, where you gave me a chance when no one else would. And because, she smiled, because I think we could make something beautiful out of that harsh place. A school, maybe. A community. Something that proves broken people can build something whole. Elias felt something warm unfold in his chest. A school. For children who need it, who don't have anywhere else to go, taught by someone who understands what it's like to feel worthless. Her eyes were bright with the idea, and run by a man who knows how to survive when survival seems impossible. That's a big dream. I have the money for it. Thanks to my father. And thanks to Richard's fraud being exposed, I'll have more. Restitution. Seized assets. She took his hand. I want to use it for something that matters. Something that would make my father proud. Something that would prove Richard didn't break me. Elias looked at their joined hands, thinking about the woman in the sack who'd arrived in Copper Ridge months ago. Thinking about how far she'd come. How much she'd survived. Then that's what we'll do, he said. We'll build your school. Alara's smile was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The trial began on a cold morning in Denver. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, lawyers, curious onlookers. Richard Calloway sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking every inch the respectable businessman. But when his eyes met Alara's across the room, the mask slipped. Just for a second. Just long enough for everyone to see the rage underneath. Alara didn't look away. She stared right back, her chin raised, her hand steady in Elias's. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Documents, testimony, evidence of fraud so extensive it made the judge's eyebrows climb. Richard's lawyers objected, deflected, tried every trick they could think of, but the facts were damning. On the third day, Alara took the stand. She told her story calmly, clearly. 6 years of psychological torture, of being told she was crazy, worthless, broken, of discovering the theft and running for her life, of everything that came after. Richard's lawyers tried to break her, suggested she was delusional, that she'd misunderstood, that she'd been the one stealing. But Alara didn't break. She answered every question with the same steady certainty. And when they finally ran out of questions, she looked directly at Richard and said, I'm not afraid of you anymore. You don't own me. You never did. And when this is over, I'm going to build something beautiful out of the ashes you left behind. Something you can't touch. Something that proves you failed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. On all counts. Richard Calloway was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed. The man who'd controlled everything lost it all. Alara sat through the sentencing without expression. But when it was over, when the judge's gavel fell and Richard was led away in chains, she turned to Elias and buried her face in his chest. It's over, she said. It's really, truly over. Elias held her close, feeling her tears soak through his shirt. You did it. You won. We won. And standing there in that Denver courtroom, surrounded by strangers and noise and the weight of justice finally served, Elias realized she was right. They'd won, together. They left Denver the next morning, riding west toward the mountains as spring crept across the valleys. The world looked different now, sharper, clearer, like someone had wiped away a film Alara hadn't realized was there. The weight she'd carried for 6 years was gone, and in its absence, she felt light enough to float. Elias noticed the change. She sat taller in the saddle, looked people in the eye when they passed other travelers, smiled more easily. The woman who'd arrived in Copper Ridge with a sack over her head was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd walked through fire and come out tempered instead of broken. You're staring, Alara said, without looking at him. Just noticing? Noticing what? That you look happy. She turned to him then, and her smile was genuine. I am happy For the first time in longer than I can remember. She paused. It feels strange, like I'm waiting for something to ruin it. Nothing's going to ruin it. You can't promise that. No, Elias admitted, but I can promise that whatever comes, we'll handle it together. That's better than any guarantee. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses finding their own pace. The mountain air was clean and cold, carrying hints of pine and snow melt. Somewhere nearby, a creek rushed over stones. Tell me about the school, Elias said. What you're imagining. Alara's eyes lit up. I want it to be a place where children can learn without fear, where they're treated with dignity, not broken down and reshaped into what someone else thinks they should be. She gestured as she spoke, painting pictures in the air. Reading, writing, arithmetic, yes, but also practical skills, gardening, animal care, how to survive when life gets hard. Sounds ambitious. It is, but I have the money now. The restitution from Richard's seized assets came through, almost $40,000, on top of my inheritance. That's enough to build something real, something lasting. Elias whistled. That's more than most towns see in a decade. I know, and I want to use it right. Not on luxury or comfort, but on something that matters. She looked at him seriously. Will you help me? I don't just mean with the building, though I'll need that too. I mean with the teaching, showing these children what it means to be strong without being cruel, to survive without becoming hard. I'm not a teacher. You taught me. Maybe not with words, but with actions. You showed me what trust looks like, what safety feels like, what it means when someone chooses you not because they own you, but because they believe in you. Her voice softened. That's the most important lesson anyone can learn. Elias felt something catch in his throat. I'm not sure I'm the man you're making me out to be. You're exactly that man. You just don't see it yet. They reached Copper Ridge a week later, riding in on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like coming full circle. The town hadn't changed much. Same dusty streets, same weathered buildings, same faces peering out from windows and doorways. But the looks they got were different now. Word had traveled about the trial, about Alara's victory, about the fortune she'd won. Walt Kerrigan stepped out of the saloon as they passed, tipping his hat. Varn, Mrs. Calloway. Just Quinn now, Alara said. I've reclaimed my maiden name. Miss Quinn, then. Welcome back. Walt shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. Heard about the trial, about what happened. Town owes you an apology. We jumped to conclusions, said things we shouldn't have. Water under the bridge, Alara said, echoing Elias's earlier words. Still, we were wrong. And if you need anything at all, you just ask. They continued to the cabin. It looked smaller than Elias remembered, more worn, but it was still standing, still solid. Home, in the way that mattered. That night, sitting by the fire, Alara spread out sketches she'd been working on during the journey. Plans for the school, a main building with classrooms, a dormitory for children who had nowhere else to go, gardens for growing food, stables for animals. I've been thinking about the land, she said. Your property isn't large enough, but the old Henderson place, the one that's been abandoned for years, it's perfect. Flat ground, good water source, close enough to town but not too close. I could buy it, build there. Henderson's heirs would probably sell cheap. They've been trying to unload it for years. Then that's what we'll do. Alara looked up from her sketches. But I don't want it in just my name. I want it in both of ours. Elias went still. Alara, see? I mean it. This is ours, not mine. The dream, the work, the future, all of it. I won't do this without you. You could. You don't need me for... Stop. She set down her pencil. I need you to understand something. This isn't about money or property or legal documents. It's about partnership, about building something together because we're stronger together than apart. She reached for his hand. I love you, Elias. I should have said it before, but I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. Elias looked at their joined hands, feeling the weight of her words settle over him like a blessing. I love you too. Have for a while now. Just didn't know if I had the right to say it. You have the right. You've always had the right. Alara smiled. So say it. I love you. Again. I love you, Alara Quinn. She kissed him then, and it was different from that first tentative kiss in Silver Creek. This was certain, solid, a promise made and accepted. When they broke apart, Both were smiling. So we're doing this? Alara asked. Building the school together? Building a life together? Yeah, we're doing this. The next 6 months were a blur of activity. Alara bought the Henderson property for a fraction of what it was worth. The heirs were so eager to be rid of it, they practically gave it away. She hired workers from town and beyond, paying fair wages and treating them with respect. Word spread, and soon there was no shortage of men willing to work for the woman who'd stood up to Richard Calloway and won. The main building went up first, a 2-story structure with wide windows and a solid foundation. Alara insisted on quality over speed, on materials that would last generations. She was building something permanent, something that would outlive them both. Elias worked alongside the construction crews, lending his labor and his knowledge. He built the stables himself, working late into the evenings, making sure every joint was tight, every beam secure. This was his contribution, his way of making the dream real. Alara taught him to read better, sitting with him at night by lamplight, patient and encouraging. In return, he taught her to ride properly, to shoot straight, to read the weather and the land. They were teaching each other to be whole. The town watched the school rise with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Some people helped, bringing food, donating materials, offering advice. Others kept their distance, suspicious of change, but slowly, steadily, opinions shifted. Alara made a point of being visible, of talking to people, of explaining her vision. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was building in broad daylight, daring the world to watch. One afternoon, a woman came to the construction site with a girl of about 10. The woman was thin and worn, with the look of someone who'd known too much hardship. "Miss Quinn?" she said hesitantly. Alara set down the paintbrush she'd been using. "Yes? I heard about your school, about how it's for children who need it." The woman's hand tightened on the girl's shoulder. "My daughter, her father died last winter. I work at the laundry, can't afford to keep her during the day. She's smart, wants to learn, but there's no school here that'll take her without payment." Alara looked at the girl, who stared back with huge, hungry eyes. "What's your name?" "Sarah," the girl whispered. Alara felt Elias stiffen beside her at the name, his wife's name, the ghost that had haunted him for 3 years. But when Alara glanced at him, he nodded slightly. Permission. Acceptance. "Sarah," Alara said gently. "That's a beautiful name. Can you read?" The girl shook her head. "Would you like to learn?" A vigorous nod. Alara smiled. "Then when the school opens, about 2 months from now, you'll be our first student. No payment required. That's not what this place is about." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you. Just send her ready to learn. That's thanks enough." Word spread quickly after that. More parents came, asking questions, expressing interest. By the time the school was ready to open, Alara had 15 students enrolled. Children from families that couldn't afford traditional education, orphans from the surrounding settlements, even a few from Copper Ridge itself. The night before opening day, Alara stood in the empty classroom, running her hands over the desks Elias had built. Each one was solid and smooth, made to last. Books lined the shelves, purchased from catalogs, donated by Judge Morrison, collected from every corner of the territory. Elias found her there, lost in thought. "You nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't give them what they need?" "You'll give them exactly what they need. Someone who believes in them. Someone who sees their potential instead of their problems." He put his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You'll be wonderful." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen what you can do when you believe in yourself. These children, they're going to see it too." Opening day dawned bright and cold, with frost painting the windows silver. The 15 students arrived with varying degrees of excitement and nervousness. Sarah was there, clutching a slate and looking determined. A boy named Thomas, who'd lost his parents to fever. Twin girls whose father had abandoned them. Children who carried their own scars, visible and invisible. Alara stood at the front of the classroom, her heart pounding. For a moment she saw herself as she'd been, arriving in this town with a sack over her head, broken and afraid. Then she saw herself as she was now, standing tall, speaking clearly, believing in something bigger than her fear. "Good morning," she said. "My name is Alara Quinn. Welcome to the Copper Ridge Community School. The first day was chaotic. Children who'd never been in a classroom didn't know how to sit still. Some couldn't hold a pencil properly. Others were so hungry for knowledge they tried to learn everything at once. But Alara was patient. She broke down lessons into manageable pieces. She praised effort over perfection. She treated every question as important. Every child is worthy of respect. By the end of the week, something was taking shape. Not perfection. There were still disruptions, still struggles. But the beginnings of something real. A community of learners. Elias helped where he could. He taught the older boys practical skills, woodworking, animal care, basic repairs. He wasn't comfortable with book learning, but he knew how to teach by example, how to build confidence through competence. One afternoon, young Thomas approached him in the stables. "Mr. Varn, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Miss Quinn says you saved her, that you took her in when everyone else wanted her gone. Is that true?" Elias considered the question. "Partially true. She saved herself. I just gave her a place to do it from." "But you chose her when no one else would." "I did." Thomas was quiet for a moment, stroking the horse he was learning to care for. "My pa died. My ma couldn't feed us all. She sent me away, told me to find work. I was 8. His voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes were old. "Nobody chose me. Not until Miss Quinn said I could come here." Elias felt his chest tighten. "Seems to me someone's choosing you now." "Yeah." Thomas smiled, small but genuine. "Feels good, being chosen." That conversation stayed with Elias. He thought of himself as someone who'd simply done the right thing, nothing more. But he was beginning to understand that sometimes the right thing, the simple act of choosing someone when others have abandoned them, could change everything. Winter came again, the second one since Alara had arrived. But this winter was different. The school was warm and full of life. Children learned and grew. Alara thrived in her role, discovering that teaching gave her purpose in a way nothing else ever had. And Elias found himself becoming something he'd never expected, a father figure to children who needed one. They sought him out for advice, for reassurance, for the quiet strength he offered without realizing he was offering it. One evening, sitting by the fire in the cabin they now shared, Alara said, "I want to marry you." Elias looked up from the harness he was mending. "What?" "I want to marry you. Not because society expects it, not because I need your protection or your name, because I choose you. Because building this life together has shown me what marriage should be, partnership between equals, built on respect and trust and love." Elias set down the harness. "After everything you went through with Richard, that wasn't marriage. That was imprisonment." Alara moved to sit beside him. "This is different. You're different, and I'm different. I know what I want now, and I want you. Fully, officially, forever." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She took his hand. "So will you marry me, Elias Varn?" He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her against him. "Yeah, I'll marry you." They were married in the spring, in the schoolhouse they'd built together, surrounded by students and townspeople and everyone who'd helped make the dream real. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony. Walt Kerrigan stood as witness. Even Mrs. Talbot made the trip from Silver Creek, bringing a cake that could have fed half the territory. It was small and simple and perfect. When Morrison pronounced them married, Elias kissed Alara like it was the first and last time all at once. The children cheered, the adults applauded. And in that moment, surrounded by the community they'd built, Alara felt something she'd never felt before. Complete. Not because she'd found a man to complete her. She was already whole. But because she'd found someone who saw that wholeness and honored it, who stood beside her instead of above her, who chose her every day the way she chose him. The school continued to grow. By the end of the second year, they had 30 students. Alara hired another teacher, a young woman from back east who'd come west looking for opportunity. They added a second building for older students, expanded the gardens, built a small library. The children who came to them arrived broken in various ways. Some had lost parents. Some had been abandoned. Some had known abuse or neglect or poverty that had carved holes in their spirits. But they left different, not fixed because people aren't machines that can be repaired, but stronger, more whole, ready to face a world that had tried to break them. Sarah, their first student, learned to read fluently within a year. By the third year, she was helping teach the younger children, patient and encouraging the way Alara had been with her. Thomas became Elias's shadow, learning everything the older man could teach him about horses and building and survival. When he turned 16, Elias helped him get work at a ranch 30 miles south. Good, honest work with fair pay and decent people. The twin girls discovered a talent for numbers and went on to work at the bank in Silver Creek, the first women the institution had ever hired. Story after story, life after life, changed not by grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but by the simple act of being seen, being valued, being chosen. 5 years after the trial, Alara received a letter from the territorial prison. It was from Richard Calloway, and she almost threw it away unopened. But something made her break the seal. The letter was short. Richard didn't apologize. He wasn't capable of that level of honesty. But he asked a single question. How did you do it? How did you break free? Alara sat with the letter for a long time, thinking. Finally, she wrote back. I stopped believing your lies. I stopped thinking I deserved the pain you inflicted. And I found people who showed me what real strength looks like. Not control, not domination, but the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to build instead of destroy. You wanted to break me. Instead, you freed me. I almost wish I could thank you for that. Almost. She never received a response. But she didn't need one. On their 5th anniversary, Elias and Alara stood on the hill overlooking the school. It was late afternoon, and children were playing in the yard below, laughing, shouting, alive with the careless joy that came from feeling safe. Your father would be proud, Elias said. I think so too. Alara leaned against him. We've helped 43 children now, 43 lives that might have gone differently without this place. You've done that. You're the heart of this. We've done it, together. She turned to face him. I was thinking, there's a building in town. Used to be a dry goods store, been empty for years. We could buy it, convert it, expand the school into town, make it accessible to even more children. You never stop, do you? Should I? Elias smiled. No, don't ever stop. They watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere below, a child laughed. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called. The world turned on, indifferent and beautiful. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Alara asked. If you hadn't taken me in that day? Sometimes, but not often. Doesn't do any good dwelling on roads not taken. I think about it. I think about where I'd be if you'd walked away. If you'd believed what they said about me, that I was unfit, that I was broken. Her voice went quiet. I'd probably be dead. Or back with Richard, which might have been worse. But you're not. You're here. You're alive. You're building something that matters. We're building something that matters. Elias pulled her closer. Yeah, we are. They stood there until the stars came out. Two people who'd been broken by life in different ways, who'd found each other in the hardest of circumstances, who'd chosen each other every day since. They'd built something more than a school. They'd built a testament to the idea that people could heal, that trauma didn't have to be forever, that choosing someone, really choosing them, with intention and commitment and love, could change the world. Not the whole world, maybe, but the world for 43 children who'd needed someone to believe in them. The world for two people who'd needed to believe in themselves. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. That was everything. Years later, when Alara was old and the school had educated hundreds of children, when she looked back on her life, she wouldn't remember the pain of those 6 years with Richard. She wouldn't remember the terror of running, the fear of being caught, the humiliation of arriving in a sack. She'd remember a man who chose her when no one else would. She'd remember building something beautiful from ashes. She'd remember children learning to read, to hope, to believe in themselves. She'd remember love that was given freely, without conditions or control. She'd remember that being broken wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. And she'd remember that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to give up on themselves, on others, on the possibility that tomorrow might be better than today. That was the lesson she taught every student who walked through her doors. That was the legacy she built with Elias, brick by brick, year by year, life by life. Some people are broken by their circumstances. Others are forged by them. Alara Quinn chose to be forged. And in doing so, she proved that even the darkest chapters don't have to define the whole story. That redemption is possible. That love, real love, the kind built on respect and trust and choosing each other every single day, can heal wounds that seem permanent. That was her truth. Hard won. Hard fought. Undeniably hers. And when she died, decades later, surrounded by the family she and Elias had built, not just biological children, but the countless lives they'd touched, the students who'd become teachers themselves, the broken children who'd grown into whole adults, her last words were simple. I was chosen, and I chose back. That made all the difference. It was enough. It was everything.